So namaste and welcome to Satsang this evening. I think it's kind of ironic that one of the things I always hated as a separate being was speaking in public. So you just have to bear with me. It's not my favorite activity, let's just say. So Satsang is a place where we come together to recognize what's true. And it literally means association with or company with truth. Sang comes from Sangha, which means to gather together, a group. And Sat, you may know, comes from the word that describes the truth. So to gather together or to be with the truth is the kind of the very literal meaning of Satsang. And it's that really that I want to go through tonight. I want to do some guided self-inquiry and take us into a direct experience of what we really are, beyond our imagined self, beyond our thought constructed self, beyond our perception of what we can see with our senses and our mind. And so to do that, if you want to follow along, I would highly encourage you to follow along with what I'm saying and to go through it with me as I'm taking us through it into what could be a lot simpler and easier than we've perhaps recognized. To do that, though, I'd like to ask you to keep your eyes open while we do the self-inquiry, because we all have resistance to waking up to seeing the truth. And we all have unconscious mechanisms that play out when we try to recognize what's real. And one of those ways we avoid seeing how much easier it can be to wake up than we realize is to kind of did it myself, to drift off into a nice deep state while someone's talking and you're just kind of listening. But I'd like you to keep your eyes open and to really engage with what's being said and to follow it as far as you can. It's really not a difficult thing to do. It will, however, push against some of your beliefs that waking up is hard and needs to take a long time, because it really doesn't have to be that way. So self-inquiry is the most direct way that I found to recognize what's real, what's true about us. Not that our egoic sense of self is wrong or bad. It's just a secondary thing, and we're here to recognize what's primary, what's not going to change or leave. And to do that, we might have to think and investigate in a little different way to what we're used to. So if we're going to start right now, whatever room you're sitting in, if you want to follow along with me, I'd really encourage you to do so, because having a direct experience of what you are might make it clearer that it's not as difficult, perhaps not entirely the obstacles in our way that we think. So as you're sitting right now with your eyes open, if you notice that your senses are taking in objects, seeing objects, your eyes can see all of the things that are present in the room that you're sitting in, wherever that is, wherever time it is where you are. It's a universal experience that you can see objects in the room. And your ears are hearing these words as well, and your brain is giving them meaning, putting them together into a structure inside. And you can feel whatever contact your body is making with whatever it is that you're sitting on or lying on, whatever chair, or you may be able to feel your feet touching the floor. You can feel the air touching your skin on your face. All of that's happening effortlessly, isn't it, as you are just sitting there. There's no effort needed to see the forms, to perceive the shapes, the objects in the room that you are in. And then I'd like you to shift your attention now to the empty space that's present in the room. So in the room, there are objects present. In this room here, there's sofas, there's this chair, there's my body, all of that. But then there is also empty space in the room. And I want you to really just pay some attention to that empty space just for a short while, because it's something that we overlook, the natural skill and talent that we have as human beings, already a faculty to perceive something which is already invisible, intangible. An empty space is like that, isn't it? And it's not just because there's no object present in that space, but how, if you look at how you know the space is there, how do you know that there's empty space in your room? Well, because your body could get up and walk through that empty space, because it's intangible. It's not a thing, is it? The empty space, I can put my hand right through it. Just like I can't put my hand through my other hand, but I can move it right through the empty space. So how do you know that that space is there? Have you ever really stopped to have a look at that? Again, just keeping our eyes open, not drifting into some deeper state if you can help it for now. Just to really look at why, how do I know that there's empty space? Do you have to think about it? Or do you just know that there is something here that is not a tangible object? You can recognize the difference between a tangible object like your body and a more subtle object like a thought, and something that isn't an object at all, like the empty space in the room. So you may not have thought about yourself this way before, but what are you really then if you can already perceive forms when you use your body and your senses? And then when you use some other faculty, you can perceive something that is formless, invisible and intangible already. And you're so used to doing that that perhaps it's never really impacted you just what faculty you already have. If you can recognize that it's just as easy for you to perceive empty space, something that has no definable quality at all for you to grasp a hold of it. You can't really think about it. Just notice the space in the room that you're sitting in right now. Notice it doesn't have any shape or color. It's not changing. It's not coming and going. It doesn't have any quality. It's not something you can grab a hold of. You've never seen it. It's never been visible ever. And yet you intuitively already instantly know it's there. You didn't have to think about if there was empty space in the room when I asked you to put your attention on it. You went straight to it. It's so natural that maybe it's never actually struck you the implications that you can already perceive form like this body, or the one that you're watching this in, and all the objects in the room and the subtle objects of emotions and thoughts, all of that going on in the inner world. And you can already perceive formlessness. So does that mean then that you might be something different than you have already seen? Most of us come to Satsang with this idea, as I did too, that I am a someone in this body trying to get to the formlessness. But we've just proved in 3 or 4 minutes that you can perceive form and formless effortlessly already, that you are not subject or limited to either of those categories. And that's no small thing to wrap. Your mind might be saying, well, yeah, but that's just empty space. But if you really grasp the importance of what you're recognizing, People do 25, 30 years of meditation or yogic practices, or they spend a lifetime reading scriptures to be able to perceive formlessness, and yet you've just done it. Could it be something that is so natural to you that you've never really kind of recognized just how different that is? That effortlessly, when I asked you, you switched from recognizing forms and shapes to the formless, empty space that's here. And what if that empty space isn't really empty space? What if it's not at all what we thought it was? Our mind tends to, our egoic sense of self tends to put the objects in the room as more important, and the empty space to be insignificant, irrelevant, just a kind of necessary functionality. They couldn't have built this house that I'm sitting in without the space for the house to appear in first. But if you really stop and look at the empty space that we're describing, doesn't it fit the categories of the self? It's colorless, shapeless, intangible. It's not moving, it's not growing, it's not wanting anything, it's not trying to wake up even, it's not suffering. What if the empty space in the room is what you are? What if the intelligence, the sentience that powers life is actually present in and as this space-like formlessness that's everywhere, all around you right now? What if you are that space in which your body is appearing and moving around in? What if your body is moving around inside you? What if everything is moving around inside you? What if the space in the room is the intelligence, something that we've perceived perhaps to be inert, unimportant, actually turns out to be the most important thing, because it can't be damaged, it can't come to an end, can it? If this house was to be destroyed right now, what would happen to the space it was sitting in? If I clear out all the objects in this room, would the space be any different? Maybe the space is something so important and yet so completely overlooked by all of us. The thing that's just obvious and been there all the time, effortlessly recognized by us. But we're looking for something perhaps extraordinary or amazing when we find it, and we say, I'll know when I've recognized myself, because it'll be something amazing. But what if it's been here all the time? What if this space is the intelligence? What if it's alive and sentient? And when it comes through a human form, when it takes the shape of a human form, it's finally able to think about itself. And when it does that, it thinks that it's only present in the body. And it forgets its vast emptiness of everywhereness that it really, really is. How does that affect then how you begin to perceive yourself? What if form and formlessness are just two ways that you can show up? You're showing up as the empty space, and you're showing up as the house and the body and everything else. Are you limited then to either? Isn't it part of the fun of being a human being when the self appears as a human being, a formless awareness takes the shape of a human being, that it can come to have this exact understanding that I am not even limited by these two categories. I can be form, I can take a form, a shape made out of this sentience, but the form itself, the body, all of these objects have no inherent intelligence within them. It's the empty space, the pure formlessness that really is the sentience. And it takes the shape of a rock or a plant or an animal or a human being or a universe to try to understand itself. And if you're following on so far and you really want to take this a little bit further, let's take this a little bit further. Let's imagine for a second that all the objects disappeared, including your body, which is going to happen eventually. We may as well look at it right now. Has anything happened to you, the space? Has anything happened to you at all when the body has gone? Nothing at all can damage that formlessness, can it, that space? Because it wouldn't be able to recognize itself in that same way, because even though right now the empty space is recognizing itself, it almost needs the body and mind to contrast. It needs the contrast of something growing and changing and unfolding and aging and becoming to help it sort of step back and recognize its inherent nature that isn't becoming, it isn't growing, it isn't present somewhere, it's everywhere. Where does that space, that formlessness stop? We like to think that the space in this room stops in this room, and the space in the next room is different to the space in this room, but is that so? Is something with no tangible quality affected at all when a house is built inside it, or when a body is built inside it? This might be an unfamiliar way of looking at yourself, that you can right now, through the body that you're listening to this in, watching this, you can look through your eyes and see shapes and forms and objects. And then you can look and see the formless nothingness, no thingness that you also are. And that either of those are effortless. Can you be limited by anything then? Even when all the forms have disappeared, the space in which they appeared is still present, isn't it? It cannot disappear. The substrate, the formless nothingness that really is the intelligence that powers all of these shapes, these forms. Can it disappear? Can it go away? Can there ever not be the space? The universe can go, but the space in which it appeared, can that go? Ever? So what are you then? Does it not shift your perception from feeling like you're someone in a body trying to reach the great self, to recognizing maybe that I can appear as nothing at all, and then I can appear as someone and something? But neither of those really ultimately define me. I can take all of these shapes, or I can take no shape. And I'm not limited to either, that I am beyond even these categories of form and formless, tangible and intangible. Again, just recognizing the space, the formless space in the room. Is the room in the space, or is the space in the room? Or both of those? Or is neither of those really ultimately true? So what you end up with is a mystery. What you really find yourself to be is something indescribable that can really appear as all of this. And then the shapes that you're making will disappear, the forms will come and go constantly. But always, always is the formlessness in which they're arising. and you perceived it within 3 or 4 minutes tonight, and you just knew it was there. You didn't think about it with your mind. You didn't have to think, is there empty space in this room, did you? You just knew it when I pointed attention to it. It was a knowingness before thought. Mind may speak about it afterwards. Mind may try to think about, well, how did I know? All of that. But before your mind engaged, you knew the empty space was present. So perhaps you are something so much more amazing than you've recognized. Effortlessly perceiving forms. Look, when you look through your senses and your mind, you see a world of forms and shapes. And then when you switch your perception mode, you effortlessly recognize that formlessness that's here. And then to just gently rest between those worlds where you don't have to pick one or the other. You don't have to grab the formlessness and reject the forms, where maybe you even want to rest in the final place where you don't really see any difference between the two. I can show up this way or this way. The forms and the shapes are temporary and they change and they evolve. The formlessness is stable and unchanging and permanent. But either way, I can enjoy my formlessness and I can enjoy the form the way that I'm appearing as this human being. I can enjoy the shape I've taken so that I can recognize my infinite nature. How far does the empty space go on for? How far does space go on for? What can bring to an end something that has no definable, tangible quality at all? Something like this house has a size and a shape. Your body has a size and a shape. It has edges. It's present in one place and it's not present in another place. When we think about ourselves as the formlessness, the empty space, how far do you reach in all directions from the body that you're listening to this in? Where do you stop? Can anything make you stop if you're not a tangible, if you're perceiving yourself in your formless aspect? What makes you come to an end? Will you ever run out of space? When you begin to think about yourself this way, where is that space absent from? Are the forms taking the, are they displacing the formlessness where my body is? Is there a lack of formlessness where my body is? Or could it be that they are the same thing? Could it be that there's just parts of you that are visible and tangible, and parts of you that are invisible and intangible? And why do you have to pick one or the other? We all get on the pathway. We are sure at first that we're someone, we're a tangible thing that we can, a sense of self, and we're sure that that's the right one. And then we discover this other aspect of formless self, that we are fundamentally primary. And we're sure that that's the right one. And we reject the form, we reject the mind, we reject the egoic sense of self and the body. But what if that is to be embraced? Can we just embrace both ways that you can show up? One is temporary and changing and evolving, and the other is permanent and stable. And what happens when you don't try? You can try it out right now. Don't prefer form or formless, just enjoy both. It's possible to know with a deep conviction that you are the formless awareness that's ever present everywhere, present in every single atom, everywhere. And also to enjoy the temporary sense of being a human being, a someone. when you're not trying to pick one or the other, which is the last place our ego hangs on. It says form or formless, and it concludes that formless is better because it's permanent and we can't suffer as that. But doesn't the formlessness include all of this anyway, doesn't it? By its very nature, it's inclusive of all of the forms that are appearing in it. So we can just relax and know that we're really indefinable, even beyond the categories, the final categories of form and formless. Just here, sometimes I'm a form, sometimes I'm formless. Formlessness is always there. And sometimes I'm visible and tangible too. It's a very different way, isn't it, to perceive yourself. And it may meet with some resistance, as I've said before, because it's the end of the road when you really see this, end of the road for suffering. I can enjoy my temporary human aspect with no fear of it ending, because I am still right here as the space in which the body is arising. The intelligence is in the space, is the space. Never was the mind or the body that was intelligent. The shapes and the forms are beautiful, but they have no inherent power or intelligence without you, the formlessness. When you leave your body, it's no longer functioning without you, is it? It's considered to be gone. So I really hope that this has given you a different way to investigate, and maybe you come to see that self-inquiry, perhaps the way I do it is different to other ways you might have done it, but hopefully simpler and easier, that whether you have to listen to this again a few more times to really grasp the importance of the fact that you can already, without doing any warm-ups, without doing any meditation, without standing on your head or getting into a deep state, you immediately recognize that there's something present right now here, wherever you are, and everywhere is space, that which has no tangible quality. And that's going to push against what your mind says. Your mind says you're not worthy of waking up, but you just did it. You just saw exactly what you are. And the doubts that say, well, you're not going to be able to stay like this. It's all right in Satsang, what happens after? It's okay. Attention will wander back to forms, thought forms, won't it? And then at some point it'll wander back to the space. And then it might wander back to thoughts and doubts and questions and emotions coming up. And then at some point it'll wander back to the space. Is your fundamental nature changing in all of that? Does it make any difference at all to the formlessness, whether your mind, your attention has been totally fixated on the forms of thoughts or emotions or experiences? When you think about it, has anything happened to that space at all, even when your body appeared? Did it really come into the body, as we're led to this popular myth that I was born, I incarnated into this body? Or did the body just appear in me, powered by me? So I'd really, really like you to see that recognizing the self, the formlessness, is a lot easier than we perhaps may have believed. And once you recognize it to any degree, you really can't believe those doubts, that unworthiness, that voice that's saying, yes, but you're never really gonna get this 100%. You can't listen to it 100% again. And even if you do, has it really changed anything about you? Or as the space just been having this very vivid dream. It made this shape of a human being and was able to think about itself for the first time. And then it got kind of lost, caught up in paying attention to the thoughts. And for a long time, attention stayed there. But when you come to see, it's always been right here, hasn't it? Right here, unchanged, no matter what dream it was having. It dreamt for a long time that it was just the form only. But is anything really any different? I always would really like to make it simpler, to make it easier, to make it quicker, to recognize and to burst through the myths that really limit our awakening. And one of those is that it takes a long time to recognize the formlessness, that you've got to be ripe or ready or do lots of practice or something. And hopefully you've seen tonight that is just not true. Effortlessly you switch from perceiving forms to formlessness and back again. Probably been drifting, your attention may have drifted to thoughts while I'm talking and then back to what I was saying, and then it's just going backwards and forwards all the time. Has even wandering attention affected the space? Does it even care really where attention is? Is it diminished at all that it hasn't been recognized till now? So that might be a very different way to do self-inquiry, but I found it easier myself to kind of approach it from this way, to approach it from this angle quite often. So I will open it up for questions if anybody would like to ask a question. I've got several here to read. Got one there. I'll take up to another 3. We've got 2 now. So up to another 2 online. I'll read a couple to start off with that have been emailed in because they are very relevant to what we're speaking about tonight. Okay, so we'll start with this first one, which says, hi Helen, excuse me. I've had a few real moments when I'm in the Noumenon. So the Noumenon is just a word that I really like to use the word Noumenon because it really does describe the space completely for me. Noumenon technically is defined as the opposite of phenomenon. So phenomenon is something that's coming and going as a size and a shape and is perceivable either with the mind or the senses. And the Noumenon, the empty space, is really that space in which phenomena come and go. So it's just a word that helped me to see that. So I've had a few real moments when I'm in the Noumenon and I can watch my thoughts passing, sometimes laughing at how daft they are, and the knowing, clear as day, that I don't have to take part in them. But this never lasts long. Then, just like that, I'm back in my thoughts, reacting to them, etc. I just want to stay longer in the Noumenon. I get frustrated because I've seen the truth, but can't stay there. Thank you, Helen. Namaste. So I want to start by saying it's really, really common. It was the same for me when I was waking up. They had these beautiful experiences of what was real, and then this seemingly thrown back out into not only listening to thoughts, but really believing them and really having this opposite experience. And you could do what we've done tonight. Tonight was a real easy, simple way to kind of just shift. When you recognize attention's gone to thoughts, you can just shift your attention back to the formless space. But I would suggest also really taking it one step further, which is to question if you need to stay, even though your experience is telling you, showing you that you can't seem to stay in the Noumenon. You seem to be in and out. Could that experience be happening because there's a belief that you have to stay? So our mind says, I'll believe that I am the Noumenon when I stay in it. But that very thought is creating the experience of being thrown out of it. So what I'm talking about here is causality. Whatever I believe as the self, I'm going to experience. If I believe that I've got to stay as the self, as the Noumenon, then I'm going to experience being in it and then being out, being in, being out, in and out. If instead I can come to question, do I even need to stay in it? Even though my experience may be screaming at me, yes, you really do need to. You might begin to have a different experience. The other way as well is to question, because if I want to stay in it, by very definition, I'm stating that I am not it. I am not the Noumenon by my very statement of energetically. So do I need to stay in the Noumenon longer if I am it? Can I stay in it if I am it? And it sounds like just wordplay, but it's crucial to begin to question this. Ego wants to stay in it. He wants to keep experiencing it. But if you already are it, could your very effort to stay be creating this in and out, in and out? And instead, if you switch this question, do I really even need to stay? Not allowing your experience to dictate what you're going to think is true. You begin to see something shifting. So have a go with this and, write back in and let me know how it goes, because it's fundamental. It seems to make logical sense that we have to stay. First, we discover the formlessness. And then, of course, because it feels so nice, we want to stay in and as that more and more. But what if you don't even need to do that? You just need to come to recognize it first and then confirm that you are it as a second step. And then staying and going and in and out will all just disappear. And it'll just be here effortlessly and constantly. Wonderful. So we've got 3 questions waiting. So I'll just read this next one and then I'll save the other 2 for Monday's Satsang. So this one says, in one of your interviews, I heard you talk about your first experiences in realizing the self, but you said it felt very other at first. I feel this is happening to me in both my formal and informal meditations. I get glimpses of a deep silence permeating within me and all things. It feels constant, and sometimes it almost feels so intense that it freaks me out a bit, but never in a bad way. But it always feels other, like it's me and the silence. How does one move into the knowing that the silence and I are one and the same? These are really good questions, aren't they? Really important questions. So it always feels like other. It was the same for me. They recognize this silence first of all, which is just another word for the Noumenon, or the space, the empty space. We've been talking about empty space is silent by its very nature, isn't it? How do I come to know then that it's not just some experience I'm having, that it really is me? And the fastest way, tonight we've gone through one particular way that might help. But the other way is to literally ask the question, is there really me and it? When I notice, when I hear that silence, in the background of my experience, that kind of quiet place that feels so wonderful to recognize. And there's a sense of it being other than me. It's just to really investigate what happened for me is I really got so angry at feeling separated from it, feeling it and then having it go, that I really began to question, is there a me and it? And when next time the silence seemed to appear, seemed to come upon me, so to speak, I really tried to find a me. I was sure there was a me and it. So I really tried to find that me inside the silence. I really looked, I searched the silence. I tried to find an entity that was in the silence or listening to the silence. And I couldn't find it at all. All I found was silence. There was a body and there was silence, but there wasn't anyone listening to it when I really looked. I suggest really becoming interested in this and really questioning how, because it's an assumption that we have that there is a me and it. And even if we know here that there isn't, the process of looking and asking, searching the silence, because if there is a you inside the silence, if there really is two, silence and you, then you should be able to find that you, shouldn't you? You should be able to find it. When you search the silence, you won't find anything other than silence and a body sitting in the silence. So just really have a look and turn that, whatever problem you seem to be having, is your next contemplative question. Is there really a me and it? And what happens when I really get interested in this, when I really start to try to find it? Every single time I tried to find this separate being that was in the silence, it was just absent. And every time I looked, there was just the silence, every single time. And as I did this over and over again, it just began to become really obvious that there really only ever was the silence. The silence thinking itself to be a someone, imagining two where there really only was one. So I'd recommend turning it into an inquiry question and really looking. And all of this illusion is held together by assumption, unquestioned, uninvestigated assumptions that we are so sure of. We've been so sure for a long time that there's me and it, me and the self, that we keep experiencing like that. So both these questions, these two email questions, are really the same, aren't they? Where we're looking to move from being a me that's experiencing it every now and again to there's just this silence and nobody accessing it or living in it or trying to live as it, or all of those things that we imagine. Okay, so we will go to Mike first. Whenever you're ready, Mike.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
So this is less of a question, more of like a report.
Yeah.
That in terms of the form and formless, for a while now, it's never really had a problem knowing the formlessness that I am, and then seeing that seemingly outer forms like a tree or a rock or a car were the formlessness. It just knew itself. And I guess the way I can describe it in words is like, if I were to, like I'm looking at my coffee mug right now, but underneath thought, the formlessness wells up like it wants to embrace or hug this coffee mug. It's like this feeling of love that comes out as if it's knows it's looking at a part of itself.
Yeah.
And that has always been so for a while, but my hang up has always been, and is the interior, the thoughts, the ego part, that the anxieties, the angers, things like that. And lately what's been happening is I've been doing with outer things, I do it with inner thought energies like anxiety and fear and even frustration and anger, just looking at it as the noumenon, not trying to get rid of it, not trying to resist it, but just what is it? Sharon asked a really wonderful question, what is this made of? And it just makes you sit with it. And then what's amazing is, just like the outer objects, the Noumenon starts to well up this feeling of embracing and love again for a thought of anger or a thought of anxiety. And it's now becoming slowly but surely clear, like it's still the Noumenon. It's
Yeah.
still looking at embracing and loving itself. And therefore, yeah, that there's it's slowly what's dissolving is that resistant thought that, oh, I don't want to feel this anger, oh, I don't want to feel this anxiety.
Yeah.
That's slowly dissolving because it's realized that, oh, it's all the same. She's right. Like just like the empty space of objects in the room, the same thing with thoughts in consciousness.
Yeah.
It only knows and sees itself. So
It's really good.
that's
It's the areas where we have a lot of thoughts about things where we don't actually really look at what it is, do we? You know, so I can look at my coffee cup because I'm not emotionally invested in it, you know, so it's obvious. It might be clearer or easier to see it's the self taking the shape of a coffee cup, you know, but then when it comes to something like anger, fear, or unworthiness, or you know something like that, or some human being that I have a close relationship with, or somewhere I've got lots of ideas about them, I'll feel this resistance to kind of really doing this kind of investigation for some time until I just kind of like, you know, I'm just going to actually look at what this is rather than what this being is, rather than continuing to think about it, you know, and resist in that way.
yeah. I remember you said something when you were answering letters, that something I'm paraphrasing along the lines of like, as the self, don't be scared of being a person. Like it's okay if you go into your person and you know who you are, and that's slowly becoming clear. Like it does. This formless goes back into form, becomes a person, goes back into formlessness, enjoys the view, and then it gets interested in what it's doing, becomes a person.
Okay.
And yeah, to not be scared of that. It's very
Being
relaxing, relieving.
Yeah, because you don't have to police the attention then, do you? When you realize it's the same, whether I'm looking at fear or unworthiness or I'm just perceiving the silence, it's all the same in the end, isn't it? So there's not even a preference for peace and bliss then, because even fear, if it arises or something, it's totally looked at with a curiosity, like what really is this? Or it's just already known this really is the silence appearing as this fear. And then there's peace as well, and there can even be, you know, joy and love and bliss present even with a strong negative emotion. And so you don't really have any preference then at the way it's going to show up, because you're not really sort of believing so much in these good and bad and wanted not wanted shapes, you know, it's taking, you know, I prefer this emotion to that one. But when they're both the same, it loses its you're not pushing against all the time, are you, the negative and trying to get the positive, and then it just seems to level out anyway. You tend to get much more of the nicer feeling emotions.
Yeah, I'm sort of reminded of like, I'm always scared of jumping into swimming pools, and people are like, come on in, the water's fine, don't worry about it. And I'm always like dipping my toe, going, really, it takes me like 45 minutes to get into a pool. But then when I'm in, I'm like, oh, they're right.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is this is fine. I didn't have to worry about it. This is good. And I
yeah.
feel that way. I remember you saying something like, when you don't push against it, peace will be your constant companion.
Mm.
And that, yeah, I'm much more noticing the peace in the background, even when the drama of the person is continuing.
It's really just a couple of ideas that holds the whole thing together. You know, fear is just a lower frequency than bliss, isn't it? Where is it written that it's bad or wrong? Yes, it doesn't feel as nice in the body, but that's because we're pushing against it. If we can experience even fear without pushing against it, it'll quickly turn into peace and then into love. It'll transmute itself. And you see that there isn't anything that's unwanted then, because it's only been unwanted because I've been pushing it away so much and expending all this energy believing I want this thing and not that thing, you know, and trying to sort through my experience constantly, you know, and I'll only be happy when I have all positive, you know, because kind of where we start out, isn't it?
Yeah. And it seemed that true freedom is not having that push-pull, just not being able to resist.
Yeah, and ironically, when we get to that, we tend to experience more of what we want anyway. You know, and eventually, pretty much all the time, you know, it's even if there's a negative emotion present, it's just cushioned in that peace, and you're not resisting it or rejecting it. It's got permission to exist, but it's not affecting someone. It's just arising inside the great space of your being. It's a very different way then, isn't it, to experience something we would have called a bad thing.
Yeah, again, it's like, oh, it's just as, it wasn't as bad. Just like Helen said, it's relieving. It's, oh, I didn't have to worry about being scared of my feelings.
Yeah. You know, for the rest of your life, your attention might wander back to the thoughts every now and again, or to some emotion that comes up, but it'll wander back. And as you know, as you see clearer, but I am that formlessness. Naturally, it's falling in love with its formless aspect more and more, isn't it? The self appearing as you. So it's not like you've got to drive it or push it. It's naturally going that way anyway. And as you just don't make a big deal about when the attention goes back to thoughts, you get caught up again. You know, as you don't allow that to be evidence that you're going to beat yourself up and feel unworthy, then very quickly attention just shifts back anyway. It's just like, so what? I paid attention to thoughts for a while. No big deal. And it's just slides back.
I really sort of like the analogy I use, like the attention is like one of those modern cars with a lane assist. So when you go off, it beeps and then it goes back to the middle of the road where it's smoother automatically now.
Attention wanders to thoughts and you start experiencing those thoughts and something goes, ew, don't like that. Let me go back, you know. So it's self-correcting anyway, isn't it? Because it feels too small. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Wonderful. Good sharing. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely. Steve, whenever you're ready.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Get your face on. I'm here anyway. It's more of a share than a question.
Yeah.
I enjoyed tonight's you talk about the space. Now familiar I am to the space, if not absolutely the same, you know what I mean? And I really got into that way. I enjoyed that.
Good.
I've just been to another meeting, different type of meeting altogether, but I was doing in the meeting of a few people, and I was sort of sat around and I was doing that. How far do I reach? Can I end? You know, and I was looking at this certain guy, and I thought, where does he end? Where do I finish? You know, that's all.
Is there really an imaginary division somewhere?
Is there a division? I couldn't find the division. No, I was doing that.
Good.
And I also noticed as I was going around the room, so I know a lot of them, you know, for years, you know what I mean? And some just don't seem to. Anyway, it doesn't matter really. The thing is, around certain people, I got a discomfort, judge. I started to judge or whatever it is, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I've started to understand now about reflection, I think, you know, and I thought, so it's not the guy, it's me, you know, and I started to look at what's causing the discomfort. It's not the person, it's something in me that's uncomfortable with. Yeah. Probably the judging, part of it. Am I judging me? No, I can't. Sometimes I think, am I judging me? But do you need to have a specific, so it's reflecting a bad feeling inside me. Do I need to know what that feeling is, or do I just look at the feeling?
You can look at it more specifically if you like, but if you recognize, if I'm judging someone and I start to feel uncomfortable, it's reflecting back really, because that person isn't really outside of me. They're not separate to me. I think I'm judging them. What's really happening is it's showing me I'm still judging myself, you know, so, and that feels bad.
That's the way.
Yeah. Right. So it might not be a conscious thing in that moment, but I can then begin to look at, where am I still being really hard on myself here? You know, where am I still not really recognizing the truth that all of us are convinced that we're not getting anywhere in our awakening, that we're not good enough. you know, that we'll never reach, you know, we have all these ideas that we used to beat ourselves around the head with for quite some time. And it might be just showing, reflecting back to you, could you be nicer to yourself even a bit more, you know? That's the uncomfortable feeling, isn't it? That I am, whenever I start to feel bad, I'm believing some thought, you know, it's probably some idea crept in that, oh, I'm judging this person, I shouldn't be doing that, or I want to stop that. And, you know, yes, we prefer not to judge people, but if I'm doing it in this moment, I'm not going to say that's wrong. I'd like it to be different, but I don't have to push against that and reject myself in the process, you know. It can just be a very general thing of, you know, if I'm scared of someone, you know, I found out that I was, it sounds crazy, but really scared of myself, scared of the self. I wanted it and didn't want to wake up. So it was always reflecting back to me in some very way. But the bottom line about it all is that it's where I've gone back into thinking there's a division between me and this being, isn't it? Somehow. Yeah.
Well, it comes after the feeling.
Yeah.
I don't know which way it happens really, but I say I just get this. And I look at the guy, I thought he's doing the best, Steve. You know what I mean? But even that I shouldn't need to think that. I should so let's have a look at this, Steve. What is it? You know what I mean?
You'll notice that the people that you think about more are the ones that you feel more separate from. We get into this feedback loop of, I really feel separate to this being, and I've got lots of thoughts and feelings about them. If you really sort of look at that closer, maybe I feel separate to them because I'm thinking about them rather than in this open and kind of inquiry.
Yeah.
And it's really only where we just go into automatically thinking about something rather than investigating, isn't it? It's not even really anything to do with that being in the end. It's just where I switch back to thinking about them rather than directly experiencing them. You know, and that it's just something we do for a while till we kind of recognize. The more I think about someone or something, the more separate I'll feel to it and the worse I'll feel. The more I don't assume anything, even as you started off this conversation, that don't even assume that they're separate to me. I'm actually looking, is there really an imaginary line halfway across this room where my beingness stops and theirs starts? Then I'll feel amazing, you know, I'll start to feel peaceful and open and expansive.
Yeah, but he did say something about looking for peace rather than not peace, let's say, head stuff and this and the other. And
Yeah.
I'm still definitely doing that. I think peace is where I need to be, and the other stuff I can sort. I'll deal with it and get short with it. And, you know, so that's going on. But
yeah,
I think I'm seeing more into that. Right?
Definitely, it sounds like you're really starting to break through this core assumption that there are all these other beings that I need to. You know, if we show that they're separate to us, we'll start to try to defend ourselves or protect ourselves or try to get those beings to like us or approve of us or accept us or all the things we do as a human being.
Yeah, I'm very sure it's my problem, if you like. It's not that or that or this or that. It's my problem. And I do look now. I go straight in here.
Good. And, you've been consistent, and you're starting to get the results of that consistency. That
I sense that. Yeah, I really do.
It starts to gather pace, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I've been feeling rough. Go on, sorry.
I was going to say, if you just notice where you really start to feel bad is where you're thinking about something or someone a lot. You know,
sometimes the feeling first, and then it's the thoughts come. Then after they've gone, I thought, what's up with you now? Yeah, the kid's doing all right. You know, it's like that. I'm pushing somebody away.
It's just a habit, isn't it?
Pushing yourself away, Steve.
Some beings we don't have any defenses to, and we immediately feel quite good around them. Other beings we've just assumed automatically, it's been passed down, you know, from our parents, that there are certain beings we need to kind of have a little distance from or something, you know, it's just a habit of being, really.
It'll sort itself out, will it?
Yeah, just to notice that going on and say, do I really want to keep experiencing like that? Really, the person that I really don't like the most can really teach me the most in this area, right? Is it really them that I don't like? And is it really stemming from this idea that they're outside of me, separate to me? You know, it doesn't mean you're going to accept all kinds of behavior from someone. You still respect your own self as well, but maybe everything is rooted in this idea that me and this other being are separate to each other. You know, that's where it all starts, isn't it?
Also gets back to that separation, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's so I'm always bringing it back there, because that's the where it all starts.
I see it. I do it. You know, I do see it. It spins around. But
it's
like
just
you said,
a habit, isn't it? Like any other habit, and it can be changed.
And look at it curiously, yeah.
Just to prefer to question, as you're doing so well. Is this being really separate to me? It's just automatic, isn't it, to look at someone and assume that they're different to you because they appear different, their body looks different, they sound different, all of that. You know, it's just a habit that can be changed like any other.
Yeah. And the fact you know about me, I feel I've been full of a bit of a cold, and I've been really, really tired. You know, I go through this tiredness every now and again. It might last a week, fortnight, whatever. You know, and sometimes I go into a depression, and it's really trying to suck me in. The old head, you know, but this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen, and it might happen. But I'm still doing the work and being able to do the work and seeing progress in what I'm doing in myself. It's very, very subtle, but
yeah, it's encouraging when you realize that your awakening is happening despite what the mind is doing. You know, it's happening anyway in the background, isn't it? Usually quietly, just kind of progressing, deepening, and that no matter what resistance comes up, it can't actually stop your awakening. It can make you feel worse while the awakening's occurring, but it's not actually stopping anything. You know, it was a huge relief for me when I saw that. I can't screw this up. I can't get it wrong. I can just try, you know, despite my best resistance, it was happening anyway.
Yeah.
Which is always good to know, isn't it?
I've got to that point where I do get not excited, but I feel like crap, but usually at the end of it, there's so much changed. Very, very subtly, so much. And I'm sort of wondering what's happening this time. So that's in my head now. It never used to be. I mean, it never used to be there before. It was, where's this going to bloody take me? You know, that sort of thing.
Just gradually, can you feel something is just getting less and less interested in it? It's getting less and less interested in that experience. It's just kind of like watching the same old TV show again and again and again. After a while, it's like, isn't there anything else on? You know, as I switch to another channel, it's just getting a little bit bored of going through that experience and having that same outcome. And actually, it's just preparing peace, isn't it? I'd rather just have peace than this.
I would, yeah.
Wonderful.
But it's accepting it and with the peace, isn't it, somehow?
Yeah. It doesn't, ultimately, it doesn't change the self whether you listen to your thoughts or not, does it? The self is the self. You know, whether you have a good experience or a bad experience, you're still the self. When you really get that.
I ain't got that far yet, but I know what you say. I don't know.
It's happening though, from what you're saying. It's starting to happen. Yeah.
Lovely.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Lovely. Okay, so we will leave it there for tonight. And I just want to say thank you for joining me. Namaste.